From the studios of 850 AM, WFTL in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, this is Outlaw, America's alternative voice. Streaming around the world at outlawshow.com. Tonight, a special roundtable discussion about bullying, sponsored by Nova Southeastern University. Our special guests include Jessica Wilson, Lucas Alvarez, and from Safe Schools South Florida, Robert Lupo. Now, your host for Outlaw, Dean Trantalis.
Good evening. My name is Dean Trantalis, and welcome to Outlaw, America's alternative voice. Tonight's show is being brought to you by and sponsored by Nova Southeastern University. This is our fourth show as we continue the journey into a historic approach to educate, challenge, and to provoke listeners into hearing and understanding issues that directly affect members of the gay community as well as their families, their friends, and co-workers. Tonight we will explore the issue of bullying in schools and the victims it claims. Our guests include Jessie Wilson, who is the Gay Straight Alliance President at Nova Southeastern University. Good evening, Jessie.
Good evening.
Darren Carpaccio, excuse me, Darren, who is an Assistant Director at Nova University, and Robert Lupo, who is a representative from Safe Schools South Florida.
Good evening.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back and to talk about bullying right after this message.
This is Outlaw, America's alternative voice, with your host, Dean Trantalis.
News Talk 850.
And we're back. Thank you so much. Again, tonight's guests are Jessie Wilson from the Gay Straight Alliance at Nova Southeastern University, Darren Carpaccio, Assistant Director at Nova, and Robert Lupo from Safe Schools South Florida. Robert, I'd like to begin with you if I could.
Sure.
Welcome and thank you for coming tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about what Safe Schools South Florida is all about.
Safe Schools South Florida is a nonprofit organization that was formed 20 years ago, actually, this school year, by a group of concerned educators who felt that more needed to be done in the schools to help protect GLBTQ youth, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth, and their families.
I left that one out, I guess. The Q,
yeah,
okay.
The Q as well, yes,
okay.
Because, yes, students are questioning, but we felt that it was really important.
When you say questioning youth, you mean questioning about their sexual orientation?
Yes.
So they're not self-identified per se. They're just, you've included them in the category of students or young people who have questions about their sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation and or their gender identity as well.
I see.
Yes. And with that, we decided first to come together and meet with other school board officials, knowing that we needed to work to make them aware of some of the issues that the youth were facing, the youth and the staff, and that also we needed to work to change school board policy because that would be the hook on which we would be able from there to make some really lasting change.
Are you yourself an educator?
Yes.
And what do you do in the schools?
For 14 years, I was a high school English teacher with Hialeah High School, and for the last 13 years, I've been a counselor at Cutler Ridge Middle School and for Miami-Dade County Public Schools.
So as a representative of Safe Schools South Florida, what exactly, give us some details about what you do. Do you meet with the administration of a particular school, and do you do sensitivity training programs? Tell us a little bit about the role you perform.
Yes, with our programs, we have trainings for the teachers, for the counselors, for the administrators, for the school staff, which help make them aware of the issues, the stressors that GLBTQ youth face in schools, and what they can do to make their schools safer. That's one of the main programs that we have. Now, on all of our training programs, we have a panel of GLBT youth who speak very poignantly and powerfully about their school experiences and what helped them and hurt them the most. That really makes a big difference in helping change hearts and minds because they hear from the students themselves what's going on in the schools. One of the other things that we do is, now this will be our 14th year in Miami-Dade and our 6th year in Broward, is hosting our Gay Straight Alliance Diversity Day conferences where we bring together hundreds of GLBTQ youth and their allies from throughout the school districts to hear from local persons in the community resources, persons like yourself, Dean, and others who speak about what their lives can be and about the wonderful resources and support that is available to them.
Well, we're very lucky tonight because we have one of those young, poignant, speaking, articulate young people from Nova Southeastern.
Great.
And that's Jesse Wilson. Jesse, welcome.
Well, thank you.
And Jesse, you've heard a little bit about what Robert was saying about his organization, Safe Schools South Florida. But I think the people listening tonight would like to hear a little bit about, first of all, what is the Gay Straight Alliance, and tell us a little bit about the experiences that you and your friends at school have been having.
The Gay Straight Alliance in general, it's an organization that can be in middle schools, but typically you find in high schools and universities, which serves to facilitate providing a welcoming environment to LGBT individuals, LGBT students who need that support, as well as providing an outlet for straight allies and LGBT individuals to really get out in the community and be visible, do volunteer work, community activism, that sort of thing. The GSA at Nova Southeastern University is unique because it's both an undergraduate and graduate organization. So our undergraduate side works really to try to provide a very welcoming experience for students, because a lot of undergraduate students are more the victim of the pressures of just coming out, maybe not being accepted by their family, not being accepted by students. So they experience a little bit more of the pressure. And our graduate side works in training individuals going into helping professions to be a bit more sensitive to the needs of the LGBT community.
So in the graduate side, do you find yourself working in the same way as the Safe Schools South Florida does in terms of working with administrators in other schools in trying to teach other teachers on how to handle situations that may come up in their classrooms?
It's a little different because our graduate side is focused through the Center for Psychological Studies. So we are training psychologists as well as individuals who are going into nursing, pre-med, things like that.
So do let's say, for example, a student comes to you and here they now see that Nova Southeastern has a Gay Straight Alliance organization, and he or she comes to you and says that they've had an experience where they feel that that they've been a victim of bullying, and that they brought it to the attention of their professor, or they brought it to the attention of an administrator, and they're indicating that perhaps they didn't get the response they wanted in terms of some level of protection. Can you tell us a little bit about what really constitutes bullying in that situation?
Bullying, unfortunately, can come both from our fellow students as well as from faculty and staff. For an individual who doesn't get that sort of response, if they reach out to an adult, and especially for a young person, that can be very difficult to do, to reach out to someone who is in a position of authority, and to not get a positive response, that leaves a lasting impact on the psyche of how that person views themselves and how that person views how the world sees their sexual orientation. And so I think that act alone, though it might seem small to other people, for individuals who understand how painful that can be, it's significant.
Well, Darren,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about the role you play as an administrator at the university. Tell us a little bit about what your office does and the types of experiences you've been having.
Sure. I'm the Assistant Director for Residential Life for the Department of Residential Life and Housing at Nova. We house about 1,400 students on campus. My particular role is in regards to training and hiring our resident assistants, but also training and hiring our professional staff along with working with the director. So we spend a lot of time working with our resident assistants, which are undergrad and both graduate students in the halls, that are peer leaders and mentors, exposing them to both trainings that have to do with identity, social justice issues, also trainings on privilege and how we perceive each other. I spend a lot of time personally in my day-to-day interactions as an out male on campus to really build those connections with students, whether they be in the GSSA or whether they, not necessarily identify with a particular group, but as being an advocate to sort of bridge other departments, but also to the academic side of the house.
So the experiences that you may run across as an administrator, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that may have occurred most recently at Nova that give us some indication of what is this bullying concept that we're dealing with?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really now on the social networking sites. We have a lot of bullying that happens on Facebook, a lot that happens via Twitter. We also have, what's interesting is that bullying happening in the community on campus, but also bringing folks that may be from hometowns involved because of the social networking piece, the fact that it's not just local to the university, but it also stretches back home. And we've actually had parents get involved, both in the negative, but also as the positive. We have had instances where parents have been part of the bullying piece, but we've also seen a lot of support from home too. We do see some of that. We do see some graffiti on whiteboards in the residence halls. For example, maybe the word fag sprawled across someone's door in the residence halls, or various expletives regarding different activities. And then we really try to find out what exactly is happening. We have a zero tolerance policy in the residence halls in regards to things like harassment, hazing, and bullying. So we really try to take an active approach and really investigate to the best of our ability so that we can support those students that are being targeted. One of the things we do with a victim of bullying, much like a victim of sexual assault or something else where power is lost, we try to give as much power back to the person that has experienced the bullying so that they feel that there's some control back over their life. So they're really brought into that process so that we're not making the decisions for them, but we're advising the student on what the options are and then helping them make whatever decisions they feel are appropriate.
And is this coming from a policy of the administration where they are attempting to minimize the impact of bullying, of incidents that may occur at your school?
Yeah, very much so. I think the administration is keen and aware of the concept that all this stuff is happening across the country. One of the things that Nova is trying to do is address this as they happen and change the culture on campus so that we have less instances. I mean, we have been extremely lucky on the NSU campus that we haven't seen some of the really severe bullying that we've seen at other institutions. We haven't had anyone try to take their own life because of certain cases, and it's really been part of that is the whole division of student affairs itself at Nova has really been working with the student body so that we can also provide GSSA to come in and do some trainings for us, but also be connected to the outer community to also bring folks on campus to actually share information so that people become more aware of the issues on campus.
Now, the concept of bullying is sometimes, some people think it's a pretty self-descriptive phenomena, but when you deal with it more deeply, it raises a few more questions as to exactly when does horseplay end and where does bullying begin? We see incidents where students rough up one another, and I guess you could even say this even translates into adulthood too, where the competition in society provides an opportunity for people to try to diminish or minimize, creates an adversarial situation in day-to-day life. But I somehow, from what you're telling me, it sounds to me like you're saying that the context at the student level, the younger individual, has challenges here that certainly adults have fewer means in which to deal with any kind of bullying that they have encountered either at school or outside of the school, because bullying obviously can lead to a lot of antisocial behavior. It can lead to. In fact, there was a movie recently put out by the Southern Poverty Law Center called Bullied, And the Broward County Sheriff's Department was one of several institutions in our area that sponsored filmings of this, and I happened to have the opportunity to see it not too long ago. And there we saw an individual who was physically bullied to the point of being bloodied by high school kids who just saw him as a potential victim. Why did they see him as a potential victim? They saw him his context somehow showed weakness. What was the weakness that he exhibited? Was it his being younger? Was it his being gay? Is it perhaps a combination of the two, or more elements? But clearly, identifying or being perceived as gay creates a sense of weakness in the minds of others, and certainly society has perpetrated that stereotype. And I'm wondering, as an administrator, and perhaps Jesse, you can help us out here as well. Does the perception of someone being a member of the LGBTQ community give license to others who may think immediately that they're going to respond in a weak way, and therefore they are it's open season on gay people to vent frustrations that one may be harboring within oneself? What do you have to say about that, Jesse? What do you think about that?
I think individuals who, especially children, who belong to the LGBT community are slowly discovering themselves as members of the LGBT community. It isn't so much just that they identify and that's a minority class. It's that a lot of them unfortunately break gender roles. They break a presentation that is expected of them, and in our culture there's a strong expectation for children and adults to maintain and display certain expected gender roles. And when a young boy doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to roughhouse, is more happy sitting with the girls, he's seen as a target, not necessarily because, oh, he's seen as attracted to men. I think that term, oh, he's a sissy, he's a gay boy, it isn't really they're thinking, oh, that's his sexual attraction. It's more associated with his gender display, and I think that's what makes these individuals more visible and thus more easily victimized.
What about women? Is the challenge of bullying as prevalent amongst lesbians as opposed to gay men?
I don't think it's necessarily in the sense of it being so physical, but there is the issue of women who might want to associate with other women from a friendship perspective, being seen as being a little more masculine, or God forbid it becoming known that that's where their sexual orientation is. There's a distancing, there's a cattiness, there's a less welcoming, less friend-building. Females are very socially oriented, and there isn't that same welcome acceptance for young girls when they discover themselves as members of the LGBT community. Or as lesbians.
So bullying sort of translates amongst women as a sort of shunning process. Is that kind of what you're saying tonight?
From my experience and from what I've seen, I would say that.
So so amongst men it becomes the evidence of violence seems or physical contact seems to be more prevalent, because certainly in the film that we saw in Bullied, the character was a gay male, and time and again when we see articles in newspaper or when we watch movies about bullying, they always seem to focus on gay men. We don't really hear a lot about women and they're being victimized by other women or other men because they happen to be lesbian. So tonight we're hearing, I guess, that there's still another form of bullying, and perhaps more subtle amongst women.
And I think one that's frequently forgotten too is that lesbian-identified women as well as trans women are much more frequently victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault.
Now, is that part of the? So who is perpetrating that sexual assault? Is it other women?
No, males typically.
Males, okay. So is that part of the sense of the weakness? Back to that again. Those who feel they have to dominate and they look for victims. Picking gay men or perceived gay men out of a crowd and exacting their urges onto them. Is that kind of what we're seeing, and even in the transgendered community as well? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I've never understood the origins of that. That's one of the things it doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, I went on the internet, of course, to give myself a broader background on this, and a lot of what is said about bullying has to do with aggressive behavior and one where there's an imbalance of power or strength. And again, I think those words are associated more often with the gay male situation, and I'm not sure if strength or power or intimidation are necessarily associated in the female aspect of bullying. It seems to be more of a psychological aspect to it than a domination. Is that how you perceive it?
I would say that's fair.
And yet there seems to be so much emphasis on the gay male aspect of bullying, and we hear so little about women who might also be victims of this bullying process. And not to minimize the male aspect of it, but I just feel that perhaps it's too the female situation is too often overlooked and never seems to make it in the news or the movies. But certainly it's present. I'd like to ask you, Darren, have there been incidents at school that you had to sort of as a school administrator get involved and mediate, or is there a courts type of situation in which, say, student conduct is brought before the administration and some kind of resolution is achieved through a panel? Does that exist at Nova Southeastern?
Does. I mean, we do have obviously a student code of conduct, and we do have judicial proceedings that take place on campus. If you're a residential student, in the sense that you reside on campus, that primarily is the responsibility of my office and the Department of Residential Life and Housing. If you're a commuter student and you attend classes and live at home, then that typically falls with the associate dean of students. We have a judicial proceeding where if you're named in an incident on campus, then the department or the dean's office investigates to find out as much information as we can regarding the incident, and then we speak with those individuals involved to find out exactly as much information as we can and find where the responsibility lies with the individual parties. We have had some cases on campus that have been, in some instances, in relationship with experience I've had at other schools prior to coming to Nova, are pretty minor. It tends to be mostly regarding roommates, and there it tends to become very coded in language about I don't like my roommate because of all these different reasons, and it's not necessarily because they're gay or lesbian. And then that leaves it up to our office when they're talking about room changes and whatnot to really work through that to find out really the issue is about my roommate's a lesbian and her girlfriend's over all the time and I don't know how to deal with that, or my roommate might be gay and I'm not gay and I don't want to live with him. And then we have those conversations about education along with trying to figure out a way for these two individuals to communicate through student mediation services and so on. I think we are very lucky that we haven't had a significant instance of bullying on campus at Nova, whether it be physical, whether it be complete ostracizing of a student from a particular group. At least I haven't been made aware of it in the residence halls. I don't know if the Associate Dean of Students has heard something more significant, but typically when it's that significant, it is communicated throughout the department so that we can better look for things on campus to better address them. But for example, at a prior institution before I moved to South Florida, I worked for Small Liberal Arts outside Boston, and we had a female student that was in the process of transitioning from female to male. And her and her girlfriend had lived in one of the rooms in a traditional residence hall. A couple of male students down the hall didn't approve of her transition and barricaded her door with a bedroom from another hall so that she couldn't leave her bedroom. So then we had obviously to deal with that. So it does happen, but we've been lucky at Nova.
Well, as it happens, there is a student at Nova who made the headlines within this past year, whose name I won't repeat because a fear of fear of retribution, which we don't want anyone to suffer from that. But she transitioned, and she was asked to come on the show tonight, and she feared coming on the show tonight for the very fact that she might be harassed. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that after the commercial break, and I think you've certainly enlightened us quite a bit on the issues that confront us. But now I'd like to talk a little bit about more specific examples and what it is that we can do as students and as adults and as student adults to try to head this off and see what in society we can do to make this go away. We'll be right back.